So now we're going to hear from some of the leaders in renewables microgrids for mines, and we're going to hear about real perspectives on global developments and really some lessons learned. We've heard a lot from our colleagues on the mining side already in terms of projects they've done and projects they're looking to do, and now we're going to hear for those who are really at the forefront of this market on the renewable energy side. And to begin the session and to give us some insight in terms of the global trends in microgrid applications and economics, we're going to start off with Tom Smith. And Tom is the president and CEO of Sterling and Wilson North America.
Okay. Well, I don't have any prizes for found cell phones or anything, so I'll get going. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to the group. As I was on the plane on the way up here, I really love coming to Canada. Two of my most favorite things, I've been an avid hockey player for the last 55 years, so obviously Don Cherry and others are my heroes. But even more important than that, I've been an avid beer drinker for the last 45 years, and I know you guys are really good at that in Canada. But before I get going, I'm going to give a little perspective of who Sterling Wilson is, and then talk about our view of hybrids and how energy is looked at in the mining sector. Obviously, I run the North American operations for the company, but I have our team that's really from all over the world that's here, and I'd like to give a quick introduction of them. So if you see them around the conference, you can talk to them about, other specific areas of the world other than North America. They're right up here in front so they can heckle me. Deepak, I'll just go by the first names. He runs our hybrid group. Vince, he's with a partner here in Hamilton, Ontario that we're working with. Rajesh, who's my boss. So when you see him, just tell him I did a great job and need more money. He runs all of the global operations for our power gen group. We have Alex, who's here. Alex is a battery expert from Colorado, and our Latin American operation, Jose. So you can see we've got we have about half the room. We have a pretty big group here to focus on this conference. One of the things I was thinking about, I've been involved in energy. I hate to say it. I started in the business in 1980. And I was thinking in 1980, I don't think there was the word microgrid. In fact, in 1980, the word cogeneration was just formed. When I started into the business, people called what we're doing now total energy. And total energy is really controlling your energy. And a lot of people that self-generated then, that's what they were looking at doing. And I think our industry, and having been in it for a long time and trying to draw a parallel, is very similar to the computing industry, right? When computers came about, there were big centralized mainframes that everybody would do all their computing with. And now you have individual PCs, or you have your portable devices, and that's what's doing your computing. Very similar to power. Historically, people got power from central generation plants, and now we're moving more to microgrids or distributed generation. Just to look around the room real quick, where is everybody from? Are there people here from Europe? Okay, we got a Europe. Middle East? No one there. Africa? South America? Okay, Asia? Oh, okay, there. And US? All right, and Canada? Okay, the US and Canada people, you guys are my responsibility, so really focus on this because we need to get business from you guys. No, just kidding. So when I thought a little bit about the presentation, I looked up the definition of microgrid. And what a microgrid is a small network of electric users with a local source of supply that is usually attached to a centralized national grid, but is able to run functionally independent. So really what we're talking about today is how we're using the existing energy assets we have to optimize them for a changing world. Okay, if you take a look at the presentation, what we want to cover is just give you a little overview of who Sterling Wilson is and what we do as a company. I think it's important because we're not a household name yet in certain areas of the country, or world, I should say, but in India, Sterling Wilson, as you'll see, is extremely well known. We want to talk a little bit about the cost of applications of hybrid and how we're seeing the trends working in our favor. We want to talk about some limitations that are there in the marketplace and what we view as what's next. So if you look at Sterling & Wilson, we're actually owned by the largest private conglomerate in India called Shapoorji Pallonji. For those of you who follow social media, we're not the family who invited Beyonce and Jay-Z to sing at their daughter's wedding, but they're pretty close to that in wealth. Very, very large company. They've been in business for well over 150 years with over 60,000 employees and over $6 billion in annual revenue. So again, very, very large company. We're headquartered in Mumbai. Just some weird facts about Mumbai that I looked up just the other day. Mumbai has in their general area about 25 million people in an area that's about the size of Toronto, where all of Canada has 36 million people. So you can see Mumbai in itself, a very populated area with a lot of growth. You know, the country of India has almost 1.4 billion people. So again, making a big impact globally in the world. We're involved in a lot of different segments of the industry, from engineering and construction, infrastructure, energy, as you'll see here in a minute, real estate, water, and then I have a group that does financing of projects that we're involved with as well. So a very, very large conglomerate with a real focus on microgrids and hybrid energy. If you take a look at the group that I work with and our team here, we have 91 years of experience in business. Our revenue is about $1.5 billion. We do business in over 60 countries across the globe. We have almost 10 gigawatts of installed power generation capacity. In fact, I was just in the Middle East, and we have a project in Abu Dhabi in solar that's almost 1.2 gigawatts of solar generation, the largest project in the world. And we're backed by a very, very large company that can support projects, again, financially across the globe. And even though the hybrid group is relatively new to our business, we've already received some global awards about excellence in EPC contracting in the hybrid microgrid space. If you look at where we're located throughout the world, you can see there isn't a continent that we don't have an operation. Here in North America, we have an office in New Jersey, another one in Illinois, Colorado, California, and we're looking to expand in the Toronto area. So again, North America is a big piece of our growth, but our first hybrid project that we're doing is with solar is actually in Nigeria. So you can see we cover the globe of expertise and knowledge. So my presentation, as we talk about the future of hybrids and the technology, it's more focused on trends in the industry. Obviously, things are very specific. In a past life, I was involved in a project in Timmins, Ontario, in a gold mine that was combined heat and power. Again, the economics of that project and how you would use waste heat off an engine are probably very different than you'd see in Nigeria or Australia or other parts of the world. But I think the overall trends in the industry are leading towards what we talked about before of microgrids for a lot of obvious reasons. If you take a look at why Sterling Wilson is in the hybrid business, it's very easy to tell because all of our individual pieces that we do relative to power gen are really put together are what a microgrid is. The group that Rajesh and I work in, the power gen group, obviously we're very big in combined heat and power, which is the simultaneous production of two forms of useful energy from one, which is an extremely efficient way of using a typically fossil fuel to convert it to usable energy in the range of almost 85%, depending upon the application. We're very big now in the hybrid and energy storage area with the talents that Deepak and his team have brought on board. So we know batteries and energy storage extremely well. As we talked before, we're the world's second largest installer of solar systems, just behind a Chinese company. So again, we're one of the largest installers of EPC solar in the country. We have a group in India that makes diesel generators. We do a lot of work in transmission and distribution, mechanical work in power plants, and big in data centers. So if you take a look at just our core focus areas, it leads you to be, leads us to believe that we could easily become the leader in microgrids because of our expertise in all of the other areas. If you take a look at really what is a microgrid and how hybrids come into play, I really like this slide because it takes a look at all the different renewable technologies that can be available to a grid. In this case, you see the big wind turbines and solar panels. Then sort of to, I guess it would be your right in the corner, you see a power plant, which is traditional to what we do with either gas or diesel generation combined with batteries. So if you want to look at a way to really control your energy, it's how do you cost effectively combine all of these technologies to have a grid that's going to provide you low cost energy at the reliability that you need. And also a big driver in our industry today is what we're seeing relative to emissions and carbon footprint. I know a lot of major mining companies have sustainability goals that are really important to be met, and running your mines with 100% diesel power generation, it becomes very difficult to make that happen. So a hybrid renewable microgrid is a very, very cost-effective alternative to your traditional sources of power. If you take a look at whoa, my gosh. All right, I'm going to need some help here. Oh, there we go. No, I guess I don't. If you take a look at one of the trends that you're seeing in the overall microgrid market, I think this graphic is a really good one. It sort of shows, if you look at the orange segment in the lower corner there, you can see the traditional power sources that you have are powered by fuel, typically diesel, and you use a large amount of fuel and you get the conventional power that is coming off of the diesel generation to produce the power that you want to see in the mines. And then if you look at the next slide over, you see that engines are advancing relative to efficiencies, and you're able to use and produce power using less engines. Then if you combine an engine with solar, wind, or battery, you use far less fuel. So just inherently, by using more efficient equipment, looking at integrating hybrids into your overall energy system, you're lowering your carbon footprint, having more diversity of energy, and you're having a higher level of reliability. So the virtues of hybrid technologies are really starting to take off because a lot of trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. There's more focus on reliability. Obviously, that's important for mines, and by having on-site generation, you're able to have that backup power to offer that reliability. We're seeing increased energy demands. Almost in everything we do in the world today, you're seeing more energy being used. So unless we're effectively figuring out ways to produce that, the demand is going to outstrip supply. So obviously, the technology is moving in our favor there. We're seeing mines being put in more remote sites. So it's very difficult to get centralized generation there. So you're looking to try to get different technologies to meet your requirement. You're seeing the existing forms of energy having a lot of price volatility that you're going to see in a minute in our slide. And you're seeing that the technologies of microgrids, with the lower cost of solar panels, with the lower cost of batteries, are becoming very effective. And traditional technologies like combined heat and power that we're very active in are also advancing, and their installed cost on $1 per kilowatt is coming down as well. So if you take a look at sort of trends in the industry, you can see that when you look at the cost of diesel fuel, which is on the top line, it's been very volatile, obviously with all of the uncertainty in the Middle East, with increased productions here in the United States, a lot in Canada, a lot of price volatility for that. But the overall trend is not to go down, it's to be stable or increase slightly. But what you're seeing with natural gas, for example, is the exact opposite. When I was started in the business in the 80s, in North America, our price of natural gas was really set by production levels in the Gulf of Mexico and was dramatically affected by weather conditions that could occur in the Gulf, and you would see major price swings. But now with the advancement of shale gas and the advancement of fracking, you've seen gas prices actually drop exponentially. And our country, for example, we were going from a gas importer from Mexico and Canada to a gas exporter. So you're seeing natural gas as a fuel is becoming a very, very big trend in the industry, which is going to help advance microgrids dramatically. And we're also seeing in remote locations utilizing fuels like propane, LNG, in areas where you do not have natural gas that's there. Then the other big trends that you see in the red and the blue lines are the relative cost of technologies dropping exponentially. I talked to our solar team, and they were doing projects just a couple of years ago where $5, you could get 5 cents a kilowatt hour from solar, and that would be an acceptable level. Now they're down to as low as 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So amazing drop in the overall cost. And again, it's not like you're paying for the sun, right? So it's really the capital cost of the solar panels, the installation, and the operations and maintenance. And I'm probably not the best to speak to this, but our hybrid team can. You've even seen even a more dramatic decrease in the overall cost of batteries. In fact, one of our partners that's sitting here, when I was at their facility not too long ago, they were showing me a 1 megawatt battery system, and about a year later, I went in and that same 1 megawatt battery system was about a quarter of the size, and obviously about a quarter of the price. So you're seeing a dramatic change in the cost of supplying hybrid energy, and that's because of the advancement in the battery industry due to transportation and other technologies where that's used. If you take a look at using the overall economics associated, from the previous slide, and you take a look at putting it in real cost relative to energy, and again, these graphs are just meant to be an overall general summary, and it's going to be very specific to your site. You can see the top line on the diesel option being basically the cost of energy driven with diesel fuel. And then if you take a look at what it would have cost you if you would have put a hybrid system in with solar, batteries, and diesel, what it would have cost. And again, back in 2009, you would have seen that it wasn't cost effective to put a system like that in because of, again, the installed cost of the equipment and the operations of that equipment. But now you fast forward and you take a look at because of the lowering cost of batteries, lowering cost of solar, again, the diesel relatively remaining constant, you see that putting a hybrid system in 2018 now can pay dividends and lower your overall cost of energy on average. Obviously very site specific. The other trend that's even bigger, if you do have natural gas and you are able to use natural gas as a fuel, you see that as an overall lower cost of generation because of the dollar per BTU value of natural gas on average as compared to diesel. And then if you can overlay, like one of the mining projects we looked at in Timmins, they were taking the waste heat off of the actual engines and exhaust and using that to preheat air handlers for ventilation into the mine. If you can use that value, again, your overall efficiencies are increasing. And one of the other things that we didn't even really look at, here in this slide, are a lot of the incentives that are available globally for different technologies. I know I'm very familiar with the combined heat and power world, and in our country we have a 10% investment tax credit, and different states offer incentives that can be upwards of 40% of the capital cost. You're seeing some of those same incentives here in Canada and elsewhere in the world. So I think more progressive economies are starting to incentivize technologies like this to sort of jumpstart the market and again give you better overall paybacks for your investments. If you take a look at how some of these systems can work, if you look at the version that we call the base case, that's like a traditional power plant where you'd basically have let's say 12 diesel engines running, at a load factor to produce your overall power. Again, from a cost basis, that at one time was again your lowest cost option when diesel fuel was low, cost of operating systems was not all that severe, and you really weren't all that worried about the carbon footprint. However, if you take a look at the advancements of batteries and you even look at a small example of a fossil fuel plant with like battery storage, you could end up taking offline a couple of your engines, putting in a couple of batteries, operating your engines on the base load at a better overall efficiency because you're not derating them and you have the batteries available to supplement it. So it really is a lot more efficient and cost-effective way of using the technologies that exist in the marketplace today. And then if you go one step further, where you take a look at utilizing solar and you combine that with batteries and you combine that with engines, you can see that you can run basically your operations with the solar and batteries, during the daytime and use the engines again when it might be cloudy or you don't have enough storage in your batteries. And then the last case is one where, again, you put larger battery systems in and a solar panel as well, and again it gives you just a lot of different flexibility in how you operate your systems in today's world. So you can go straight diesel generation, you can go let's say fossil fuels with batteries, you can go fossil fuels with solar, or in the last case you can look at fossil fuels, solar and batteries all together to set up an overall microgrid. Now, if you take a look at some of the economics of this, I know, again, these are very, very general numbers, but if you take a look at a base case that you might have today where you have a diesel generation system there and you have a 76% load factor, which, could be on the higher side for some mines that I've seen, but, again, we looked at a conservative case. If you looked at adding a few batteries to that system, you're operating your engines more efficiently at a better operating point, and based on the current costs of battery systems, you could be looking at having a 1.5-year payback. So obviously a very, very attractive payback with rates of returns that would be in the 30% range unlevered. So again, a very, very good investment if the technology will work for you. And now if you look at adding solar, let's say it may be a longer commitment, may take up more land, may be a little more difficult to install, but again, you can still see about a 2.7-year payback of that investment, and you're getting, again, better load factors and operating conditions on your engines. Now, if you look at the last option, which is the sort of the full Monty, where you look at fossil fueled engines, battery storage, and solar together, obviously you're looking at around the same payback as you saw in the previous example, but you're putting a lot more technology and having a lot more flexibility in your overall operations. And the other thing that we sort of stuck in there on the bottom, because I think over time you're going to see more and more and more focus on global warming and lowering your emissions or carbon footprint, you can see as you relate it to cars by putting in these types of systems how it equates to automobiles taken off the road. So in the last example, you can see if you really are focused on your carbon footprint, you know, by doing this on just a 12 megawatt system, it's like taking over 3,000 cars off the road. So, you know, quite a bit of effect on the overall carbon that we see in the world today. So what are the current limitations of the industry? If you take a look at, are we okay time-wise? Okay, I've got a little long, sorry. Take a look at the overall limitations of the industry. What's happening is in order to invest in projects like these, you have to look at two things, because obviously if you're going to invest in a long-term capital investment, you need to have a longer term. So what you're seeing in the industry today, the risks are decreasing as the value of the overall energy forms that we're putting on are increasing. So you're seeing a great trend in the industry where price is coming down, so the term that you have to pay these back is decreasing. So again, a good fundamental trend in the industry. Relative to, you know, our limitations, you're seeing that the investments of projects are, capitals are coming down, so the fundamentals are working in our favor, you know, relative to rates of return and investment on energy infrastructure. So what's next? We'll finish up here real quick. I think that there's a big value proposition for looking at hybrid microgrids. The trends are working with you. Again, it's very site specific, but as an industry, you're seeing a lot of focus. Companies like ours are spending tens of millions of dollars to enter into this space, and we believe that it's going to be a trend that's going to be here now and into the future. So with that, I appreciate everybody's time, and sorry for running over a little bit.